Hello, welcome everyone. So happy to have you all here. It's wonderful to see people come together. Our series is called Chew on This, which is the speaker series, which is art, thought leaders, authors, and chefs to feed the mind, body, and soul. And this is really kind of what we need at this moment. Rumi wrote, "Wherever you stand, the soul of that place is there." Zahav is a place, it is a restaurant, it is a destination, it is part of the soul of Israeli cuisine in America. Those of you that are here today are standing on the soulfulness of what Michael Solomonov and Stephen Cook have done to evoke place in the United States. Michael was here in 2017 with the film In Search of Israeli Cuisine at the film festival. We had to move from a 200-seat house to a 500-seat house, and he won the James Beard Award 2 days later. You probably saw the bio up here, so I'm gonna just go ahead and introduce our moderator. We're so happy to have Warren Etheredge joining us. Many of you know Warren from our other programs, story finder, film producer, educator, interviewer of thousands, and chief curiosity curator. Warren is also the shorts film programmer for the Seattle Jewish Film Festival. Without further ado, please welcome our very special guest, Michael Solomonov and Warren Etheredge.
Welcome. There we go.
You got it? Oh.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey now. How's it going?
I don't have to project at all now.
Yeah.
It feels like a luxury and a gift to be able to talk to you tonight.
Likewise.
And you are one of the nation's best, most innovative chefs. Round of applause for that. We have a lot to cover. We will talk about this book, and along the way, we'll sort of integrate questions from you, the audience. We want to enjoy this gift of conversation and just like a little break from other things out there, but I'm not going to avoid the tough questions.
Yeah.
And so I have to start with this. We'll get right to it.
Okay.
What's your beef with mayo, Mike?
Oh, what is my beef with mayo? I am, yeah, it's weird. I have a weird phobia with mayonnaise, and yes. Reservations at Zahav whenever you want. No, okay, so I grew up like a really, really picky eater, and then later in life, I started cooking actually, and I got sort of into food. Whoa, strobe lights, everybody. Later in life, and so what also happened is my dad owned a Subway sandwich place, and I would have to make. I was a sandwich artist, is what I was, and when I went to university, which was it was like 3 weeks of college, I got a job working at a Subway there, and I would have to mix like the tuna fish which was, it was like all these number 10 cans and like the biggest container of like extra thick mayonnaise, and you'd have to turn it over and like use a serrated knife to like whack into it, so it would displace some air, so it would like slide out into a tube. And it coincided with me also taking like a ton of opioids, and so I would be like really high on like morphine, and I'd have to like wrap my arms with plastic wrap, because if you mix the tuna with all the mayonnaise without the plastic wrap, your arms would smell like tuna fish for like in the summer months. It was unacceptable. And so for those reasons, I don't like mayonnaise. But yeah, I just find it to be like extra fat. I do like using like butter on like turkey sandwiches and that kind of thing. Like I do like creaminess, but I just feel like mayonnaise is for the devil. And in the book, yes, my people over here. For the book, we actually have, we do like a Caesar salad dressing that's made with tahina as well. So, and that's actually the thing with Israeli cuisine, which is like the thing that we're all trying to discover and sort of articulate and explain. But actually, the replacement of dairy, or the replacement of mayonnaise in this case, with excessive trina on everything is kind of what helps define Israeli cuisine, right? Because even though we're not kosher, or I'm not kosher like in my house, the sort of like terroir of Israeli eating involves excessive trina. It's like lamb fat and za'atar and this, and you put a little labneh and yogurt on there, it will be delicious, but once you've done that, you are cooking Ottoman food, right? Or like, Greek, Greater Syrian and all this. So for us, it helped us define, or help define, what Israeli food was and what Israeli cuisine is. And also, I never had to use mayonnaise. So, yeah.
Thank you. I'm just, my mind is still stuck on, you were working at Subway?
Oh, yeah. Sure did.
James Beard Award winner.
I mean, I was so I worked as, when I was in Pittsburgh, I was a Subway sandwich employee for my father, and then I was a dishwasher at a place called The Point that was mob-owned in Point Breeze in Pittsburgh, and my nickname there was Tel Aviv. Many years later, I was a line cook in Boca Raton, Florida, and my nickname in the kitchen was the Rabbi. That was before there were Jewish line cooks, apparently, and so I did not like doing that, but then many years later, I accidentally got a job working at a bakery in Kfar Saba, and I got a job working at this place called Mafiat Kfar, which means village bakery, which has since inspired the name of one of our cafes and bakeries, Kfar, and I really just fell in love with like cooking. I fell in love with working really hard, and I grew up in Squirrel Hill, Pittsburgh, which is like a beautiful shtetl of a town. I thought that every city had people speaking Yiddish in the streets, like, and it was just an amazing place, but I just didn't understand, being a foreign worker in a bakery in Israel was like maybe the most important sort of lesson I ever had, and I got to, every kind of person works in a bakery in Israel, and I learned how to be cursed out in like 7 different languages, and every person in Israel eats baked goods 10 times a day. So it was like a really, I was like kind of a mess of a kid, and certainly very selfish, and it was so different. Like we would go in Friday morning at 2 a.m. and make challah for like, 14 hours. And every single person, it felt like in Kfar Saba, would come to this bakery, which was like the town hall, talk some shit to the owners or whatever. And then by challah, that was part of their ceremony. Secular or observant, it didn't really make a difference. Everybody bought challah. And it was the first time in my life that I felt like I had done something for somebody else. And I was, again, I was making like 9 shekels an hour, so it was basically free. And I'd never worked that hard before in my life, and I'd never felt so part of a community. And it was probably the sort of catalyst for like what I do now, which is, hospitality, and that feeling that you get, that sort of exchange that you get. And it wasn't really, I grew up very secular. My father's Israeli, so he's a Sephardic Jew from Bulgaria, so he's like a pork-eating atheist, right? And so we grew up not super observant, and there was something that felt so religious, so spiritual with that exchange, and that probably started cooking. So
You have cited that as one of the 2 really important professional turning points of your life. I'm sort of curious because you mentioned the finicky thing too. Like, when did you stop becoming finicky? When did you start to really love the food?
It's probably when I started cooking, actually. I wasn't like that. I didn't become an adventurous eater, but I really loved the process, and I loved like getting in there and doing it. And I remember my mom actually teaching me how to make Caesar salad dressing with a coddled egg. Oh. And I was like, wow, this is and there's like coagulation of protein. There's using the protein in the egg white to help emulsify. There's the creaminess that you get from the yolk. There's the bit of anchovy. You're like, anchovy? garlic. You know, it was like so fascinating to see this sort of temporary emulsion being made in a wooden bowl by hand. And I was like, this is just very cool. And then when I started, I mean, the bakery was like, there was no like classical music in French. It was like shouting and like pizza, cutters, like chasing after like rats and all this stuff. And interestingly enough, so the word for bakery in Hebrew is mafia. My Hebrew is so shitty. The manager asked me if I wanted to like get a promotion to close the bakery, and I thought that he was trying to like enlist me into the mafia. And I was like, yes, so yes. I became a line cook only because, it was sort of secondary. And so I just fell in love with the sort of the chaos, like things on fire and, the different language, the ticket machine and like cutting myself and bleeding, it was like just really intense. And I think the sort of science behind it was incredible and just working like really, really hard, And so I fell in love with eating probably through cooking.
I'm glad you mentioned chaos, and like the chefs and restaurateurs I know, like they all talk about the chaos. This book is not born of chaos necessarily. This is born of going home, COVID, having this very different experience of cooking for family.
Right.
I know you love your family. Would you rather cook for your family, or would you rather be in the chaotic kitchen?
I would rather cook for my family. And what's interesting is that it took COVID I had cooked in my house at the time. I'd cooked dinner maybe 3 times in 2 years, and I just, I don't have great boundaries with all this stuff. I think it's also bullshit. Everyone's like, oh, you like leave your work at work. I'm like, that doesn't work, with what we do, right? I think if you're not kind of the same person and have the same values at work or at home, you're doing something half-assed, right? So I didn't cook a lot at home, and COVID was just awful for everybody, and for restaurateurs like such as Steve and myself. We had on one day 22 leases and 500 employees, and then the next day we had like 0, right? And we had to figure out how to, and in restaurants you also bet on futures a little bit, Like if our payroll at the time was like $750,000. So it, everyone was like, why couldn't you just keep people in? And I'm like, I don't know, we would have had 3 weeks to pay people before we ran out of everything. So we had to make sure that everybody that had insurance, it didn't lapse. So we had to like figure out different ways to, do these like pop-up things. It just sucked. And so, but what was interesting was that I just had not ever had that much time at home. And I'd never been able to cook for my family. And also, when you're like a little manic and you are a chef or a restaurateur without anything to do, all you do is cook. So I'd be like, it's 10 a.m., time for our second brunch, everybody. My wife is like, and I cannot have, like, no, And I'd be like, I made a mushroom makluba, and I'd like turn out like rice, and she's like, it's 3 of us, like, why are you doing this, And it was the thing that like kept us all, it made me extremely happy. I learned that I was a pretty good home cook, shockingly. I also learned that even crappy home ovens have broilers. Did you know? You all have a broiler in your house. It's not like a rusted muffin tin holder. Or, those weird-ass sheet trays that you get in ovens that are like slotted? That's what I thought it was for. I thought it was storage, but the broiler is amazing, and you don't smoke out your house. It's very cool. So
you learned a lot.
I learned a lot, and it also, Steve and I at that point lived in South Philly, like a block away from each other, and there's a amazing park called Dickinson Square, and it's actually cool. So there was Mount Sinai Hospital that was like turn of the century, that was in South Philadelphia, and they would try to woo Jewish doctors by there were all these row homes that are built around this park, but in the back of the row homes, there was this little like breezeway that was meant for mothers on Shabbat. that could
Yeah.
go around, because there was no eruv or anything like that. So it was really fascinating. That's where he lived. I had a shittier house down the street, but we would just walk around the park every morning, like in our like bathrobes and like socks and sandals, and just while everything was falling apart. And we'd, start the walk by talking about what we were going to do. Is the bank going to take our house today? Are we all going to get sick and die? Like, fun stuff like that. And then it would switch and be like, hey, what did you make? And I'd be like, hey, I'm stretching phyllo now in my house, and, and all this stuff. And it just it was amazing that we could cook and be with our families, which was great, that we lived a block away from each other. And then, we were like, why don't we just do a cookbook that is just about that, which is like real cooking, which is like what people do when they're busy, not these like, whatever you all think chefs do. We don't have dinner parties, ever. It's not Martha Stewart vibes ever in our household. It's normally like cinnamon life, almond milk over the sink, watching an Eagles game, screaming at your kids. That's what, you want to come over to my house? You're all invited. I'll get 10 boxes of cereal. And so the reality is, sometimes you have time to plan and be lavish. Sometimes you have 25 minutes before activities that you have to get your kids to. We don't want to spend, I don't need to like order goose liver foie gras, nor like would I probably to my house, because nobody would get it. And also, we just want to be quick, right? So it's like chicken on a sheet tray, like sheet tray chicken, sheet pan chicken, one pot. And so we wanted to discipline ourselves by cooking everything start to finish, just there. So it was Steve and I cooking every recipe in my home kitchen, start to finish, and we would just have somebody there documenting the recipe to make it actually make sense, and somebody producing the sort of visual stuff, right? Like layout and photography. So everything was really made organically. Most of the time, the cookbooks that you get are made with a team. They're shot in 3 days. There's props. There's like sous chefs. We've done that before, right. And this was like, I don't know, this was probably our favorite book to cook. And Steve and I got to cook together and hang out, which also doesn't really get to happen, even though his last name is Cook. And we own restaurants.
Between you and Steve, you have two wives, 7 kids.
Yeah.
You work out the math yourself.
Yeah.
Did the kids get any vote on meals? Like, did you cook something and they go like, oh, you really shouldn't put that in?
So I think that, between Steve has 4 kids and I have 3, so, one of them would like something. I think that my kids have like definitely been, my oldest is like, I would say hypercritical, and he definitely gets that from my mother. But I think that in general, like, we know how to do this. Right. The other thing is, too, generally you're cooking for an audience, right? And this has to be like utilitarian. And I don't subscribe to cooking multiple meals for kids. It's kind of like, you're gonna eat this and then, or, you'll eat, but like, you're gonna eat this food. I'm not gonna like make you extra stuff. We're just gonna like get through this, and that's kind of how I've gotten my kids to really love food and eat everything. But generally, like, you can sort of check all the boxes, right? It's gotta be quick, nutritious, not super expensive, and be very appealing, right? So it's gotta have a little pizzazz. Not too much chopped parsley, too. That's the key with kids. But no, my kids have not, I don't think they've like totally vetoed things. I have a 20-month-old, so every now and then she will spit food out. Right. And earlier, not for the book, but my oldest had like a really quick sort of like gag reflex. And if you'd ever I would like try to force him to eat broccoli, and he would just like projectile vomit everywhere. So
those pictures not in the book once again.
Honestly, it was like The Exorcist at my house with broccoli. Yeah.
I believe your 3 kids are Lucas, David, and Lizzie, correct?
Nora, yeah.
Nora, sorry.
Yeah. It's David, who's 13, Lucas, and Nora.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you see promise in any of them to follow in your footsteps?
That's what everybody asks me. They're like, are your kids going to be a chef? And I'm like, I fucking hope not, I'm like, what would be cool? Medical school. It'd be so fun. Maybe go to Europe. College is cheap there. But no, I don't. I mean, the reality is, whatever my kids want to do that'll make them happy, I will support, And so my middle son, Lucas, I feel like he's got the bug a little bit, And so he likes to make pasta, but like stretch pasta and all that, which is cool. And he loves to help out. David is into the science of it, and he's really meticulous. And I'm going to force him to work in a restaurant. He's going to be 14 in July, and I'm like, you're going to go to we're going to get you into the mafia, David. So, and Nora right now just loves food. So I don't know. I'm hoping that she doesn't fall. I mean, yeah,
it's early.
Listen, the reality is, if you love what you do, I mean, what a gift to actually love your job, and if you can monetize it, that's kind of nice too, right? So
having this idyllic time at home, you're cooking, you're doing all these things, but now you're back and you have, it seems like it goes up like the stock market all the time. You have 20 plus eateries at this point.
Yeah, 20 plus. Yep.
And you're back, really. You're back into that more
Yes.
than cooking at home. We're talking about this backstage. Now you have a bigger team. How much do you like to get back into the kitchen and actually do the work?
So that is probably what makes me the happiest, in terms of my job. You get into cooking because you want to light things on fire and not talk to people, and then you open restaurants and you're like, all I do is talk to people, and I don't love doing that. We have an incredible team. We've developed amazing chefs and managers who we've brought on as partners before. Zahav is 16 years old, and I still like to be, not even as the chef or the owner or any of that, I just like to be at Zahav during service. It makes me really happy. For many reasons, it's harder for me to spend the time that, same kind of time that I used to spend there. And now I have to actually put it in my calendar, which is so ridiculous. I would have made fun of me so much, but it's slice onions with Ben, and but I have to do that because that's actually what I love doing. I will say that I've really post-COVID, I used to take Sundays off and Monday nights sometimes. Post-COVID, I take off Sundays entirely, and I will work only Mondays and Tuesdays during the day, and I'll pick my kids up at 3, and that's kind of it. And then I get to cook dinner between 2 and 3 times a week for my family. So that's been wonderful. I mean, that's been really really nice.
You say you love the cooking, but with the status that you have, you do become sort of a figurehead. You become a public person on some level, and it's interesting. And to talk a little bit about controversy here is you have been outspoken of late, not just about your food positions, but your political positions. Did that feel like a challenge to make that choice?
Well, it depends. Which political positions are we talking about here?
I'm trying so hard.
Say, which is just us. Just us here.
We can talk about Israel and
So I talk about
October
Israel.
7th.
I try to not be too political about Israel. I try to just sort of be objective, this is information. Right. I was, prior to October 7th, a lot more openly critical about government policy in Israel, and but it got a little bit confusing on October 8th, where I was like, let's just say I really dislike the Prime Minister of Israel, theoretically, and I'm like, wow, Bibi Netanyahu is an asshole or whatever on social media, right? Hypothetically. But the next day, if I've then enabled somebody that I don't know, that doesn't think that Israel has the right to exist, I'm not doing that. I'm not giving anybody an inch in that kind of department. And it got a little bit confusing for me, where I was like, I don't know how to do this. And I'm Israeli. I love criticizing the government. That's our love language. That's what we do. And it's a wonderful thing. And you know what? It's a wonderful thing here in the United States, right? For now, to be able to criticize without penalty. But I draw the line for people that don't believe that Israel should have the right to exist. And I'm not going to like add any fuel to that. And I would think that the reaction that I saw around me on October 8th led me to believe that it wasn't in my best interest or in the country's best interest or in our community's best interest to be out there blabbing all day long if it was going to do some sort of weird justification for people that like just plainly don't like Israel or hate Israel. So that's why I'm a little bit more careful. But I will definitely, and it's like I'll go through waves, and it's horrible that we have to sit here and talk about social media because honestly, it's like sickening, and it's not nuanced, and it is algorithmically programmed for us to hate each other. And what better way to do it than over the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, right? I mean, it's just, what are we going to do? Sit and talk about like actual history, actual facts, actual emotions? No. We're going to repost a lot of stuff. We're going to all cancel each other, and nothing's going to get done. And that has been terrible. Terrible. I've lost a ton of friends. I'm sure everybody here has, and it totally sucks. The issue that I have, though, is that like I'm not going to apologize for being Israeli, right? I'm not going to do that. And I disagree with the government, that I've done before. I've flown over and protested the government. My politics as an individual have not changed at all. I believe exactly the same things for Israelis and for Palestinians that I did before, but it's just like, you're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't. So I've tried to chill a little bit. There are circumstances where I'm like, I just can't not share this or post this. I don't think that actually does anything, but it's just, for me, I can't like sit with it. So that's where I am.
There you go.
Clap or throw tomatoes from now. Yeah.
I hate to feed the beast of social media, but there's another incendiary issue here.
Yeah.
The great matzo ball soup controversy of 2015.
Yeah.
The salt.
The salt. I know.
Yeah.
I know. No salt in the matzo balls.
Yeah.
We use a ton of salt in everything that we do. This was an error. There was no salt in the matzo ball recipe in Zahav Cookbook, which won Outstanding Book of the Year for the James Beard Foundation. But that's right.
Post about it.
I will also say, though, yeah, it's whack. An under-seasoned matzo ball is like, ugh, my God. Terrible.
Terrible.
Plenty of schmaltz, and actually we add a little bit of cinnamon. My mom used to always add a little cinnamon to the matzo balls. Right, it's amazing. Amazing. So we made a huge mistake, and I'm very sorry.
Thank you
for that. Please forgive my transgressions
This is what the whole book tour has been about.
This is right for this moment.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you for owning that.
Feel free to go on my Instagram handle and call me out, please. Yeah.
Floaters or sinkers?
Floaters for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. What about you?
What? Oh yeah, floater.
Floaters.
Yeah.
I think sinker is weird. I mean, it's unleavened. Right? You know what I mean?
It doesn't seem.
You don't
like
want to lighten it up? Yeah. Yeah.
You said that lamb chops are the gateway lamb. What is the heroine of lamb?
The heroine of lamb is our Zahav lamb shoulder, right? Well, I mean, what's the metaphor? Is it good, very good or very bad? I'm in recovery. I'm in recovery, so it's like, what's that? Yeah, I would say under-seasoned lamb tartare or kibbeh, right. Under-seasoned could be the heroine in the bad way, but I would say that the best lamb, for me, I mean, our pomegranate lamb shoulder is incredible. I love lamb's tongues, and people get weird about tongue. Who here doesn't like tongue? Get out. No, I'm just kidding. Tongue is, first of all, it's crazy because they actually just look like little tongues, you know? Yeah, I know. So don't look, put on a blindfold. But here's the thing about tongue that is so good. It's got all the myoglobin because of all the work that it does. It's a very, very strong muscle. I'm grossing you guys out. I'm making this worse for them, but here's it's a very flavorful cut of meat. It is still somehow inexpensive. Have you noticed that there's no inexpensive cuts of meat anymore? Yeah, it's crazy. Even hanger steak, flat iron steak, ribeye cap, nothing is really affordable. Tongue is still affordable. And you can brine it and then you like roast it or saute it, and it tastes like it's delicious. Okay, so just try it. Just try it. For those that don't like it, it makes great pastrami too. It's really, really good.
So if you want to win favor with Mike after the event tonight, just slip him a little tongue. I think
Yeah,
that's,
that's good. That's good. We'll be canceled together, my friend. Yeah. Yeah.
It's been lovely knowing you.
Yeah, great.
I would love to open it up to the audience for questions. If I could see the audience a little bit, can we do that? Otherwise, I'm just sort of blindly, you.
Yeah.
Does anybody have a question now? Yes, in the front row, yes. Thank you.
It was a question about, and you handled everything so gracefully, about the attacks that you had at your restaurants and how, the next day you were out there just doing what you do, and how difficult has that been?
The question is about the attacks and the protests outside
Yeah,
the restaurant.
it was not an attack. It was a protest outside of Goldie, and it really sucked. And it was misguided. It is all of it. I think it's a falafel shop. You know, 5 days after October 7th, we raised all the revenue for all of our restaurants. We donated to United Hatzalah, and that upset people, and it sucked, you know. But again, I mean, it really sucked at the time. It still kind of hurts, but also, what a great country we live in where people have the right to protest, and I think that's also great. You know, I think that's important, but I also find it to be kind of silly on many levels, and I would say that we had people driving like 5 hours to eat a falafel sandwich. You know, the drive from Pittsburgh to Philly is 5 hours. A falafel sandwich is $10. I'm like, you guys, the gas that you spent was even greater, and it was really meaningful. And we had, like the White House tweeted that this is ridiculous. We had even a lot of people that typically hate and sort of instigate were like, this is too far, you know? And it didn't affect us negatively. And I think it was also probably at the time a bit of a wake-up call just to inform how sort of divided and confused and sort of divisive everything was at the time, not just for us, but for even officials and people that are in government around us. It was important for people to see how charged all of this is, you know? And, but yeah, it didn't do anything really that negative. I lost 10 years of my life from stress. But besides that,
other than that,
fine. And people in Pittsburgh drove for falafel, and that's pretty cool, yeah.
keep in mind you have 67 more days to exercise your right to protest.
Right, yeah.
Yes, in the center there.
You're really nailing the coffin for both of us right now, yeah.
Actually, I have two questions.
Yes.
First is, do shows like The Bear accurately depict what goes on in fine dining restaurant behind the scenes?
Yeah.
And the second question, are you wearing Reese's peanut butter cup socks?
Yeah. I'm going to answer the second one. I am wearing Reese's peanut butter socks. That is, I keep it real. And the first question, which is, does the show's like The Bear, or is the show like The Bear? Does it accurately depict restaurants? And the answer is yes. The Bear is the closest I think I've seen to an actual restaurant, to the point, like, I love horror movies. Like, to me, A Long Day at Work, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, chamomile tea, that's how I unwind. I watched 5 minutes of The Bear, and I was like, turn that shit off, you know? I couldn't do it. And now my wife in the kitchen will, like, scream, behind you! And I'm like, oh my God, just, like, enough, you know? So, can somebody put on Rosemary's Baby, for God's sakes? Yeah, it's great. I think it's fascinating because restaurants embody, we're like a little petri dish of what's happening in society around us. Like, we've been dealing with gender inequality, with immigration, with addiction, with so much we do all the time. I always feel like people sort of focus in on that. And also, people are obsessed with cooking and food and all this. And I thought it would be, you know, somebody should really take apart every aspect of restaurateurs, like the team and the guests, right, and the function, and turn it into like a multi-series, sort of like a Wire vibe, right, where you sort of analyze it and then bring it back together. I think that would be really, really cool. But The Bear so far is the closest.
Can you settle this? Is The Bear comedy or not? Because that's the big controversy in television.
Again, it was not comedy for me
Yeah,
at
okay.
all. Yeah, it was like I'm gonna call like my AA sponsor, like after watching it for 5 minutes. Yeah.
Yes, over there.
Okay, so this is not meant to be a political question. I'm being serious about this. But you just mentioned immigration and staffing, and I'm just curious what restaurant staffing might look like in the next couple of years.
So the question is, I'll preface by saying this was not supposed to be political. No, I appreciate it. What would restaurant staffing be like in the next few years with no immigrants? And restaurants would not work without immigrants, to answer your question. Yeah, it would be impossible. Many other sectors of agriculture also won't work. I mean, just you name it. Yeah, it would be very, very difficult.
It's like somebody didn't think that out. Huh. Okay.
Oh.
Yes.
The Eagles won? Wait, what's the score?
It's at 25 to 10 with 4 minutes left.
Hey, all right. Well,
that's
4
not
minutes in Philadelphia.
That's right. That's right.
You know? All right. Thank you so much.
My real question is, how do you think of like different restaurant concepts, and which is your favorite concept right now that you guys have?
Okay, so the question is, will the Eagles win tonight? and the actual question is,
What is your favorite restaurant concept?
Right.
How do you think of restaurant concepts?
How do-
Like Zahav versus Laser Wolf, and which is your favorite right now?
Right. How do we think of restaurant concepts, and which is my favorite right now? That is a great question. We opened Zahav in 2008 because we wanted to, I'll tell you why. Because we were cooking, if you wanted to be a cool chef back then, you deconstructed everything. You went, you sous vide everything. You clarified everything. You got like little tweezers. And you either yelled all the time or you were very quiet. And then you went to San Sebastian, or you went to Paris and worked for free for a year or two, and then you came back, ripped off that food, got a Michelin star, and died. That's, if you wanted, that was what we were all working towards, right? And so when we were like deconstructing and doing all this like nonsense, I would go back to Israel and sit down at like a restaurant in Shchonat Hatikva in Tel Aviv, which is...
That's
Okay.
somebody out there.
That would be really embarrassing. So we'd go to like a restaurant named Busi, for example, which is in Shchonat Hatikva, and there's all these different restaurants on the block, and there's a communal bakery with a taboon. So people are making lafa, which is like a big Iraqi pita. And the server would come in to this restaurant and say, what do you want? Or maybe not even talk to us. Not take the cigarette out of her mouth. She would say, do you want salads? And we'd say yes. And it wouldn't be like a big salad. It would be like 20 different salads that were like, Greek, Bulgarian, Moroccan, Palestinian, like everything. And then she'd run down the street and grab a lafa, come back, put it down, and then you'd get all this stuff cooked over charcoal. And it was like incredible. I mean, first of all, very vegetable heavy. It's like the way that you wanted to eat. Everything was shared. It was like phenomenal. From an anthropological level, it was so fascinating. It spoke to all the diasporic Jewish cuisine, all the indigenous Palestinian and Druze cuisine, the way that they were sort of related. I mean, it's also interesting and important to say that like all those diasporic Jewish cuisines do not exist in their host countries anymore. Right? There are no more Jews in Yemen, right? So the malawach or the jachnun or the schug or the things that we love don't happen in Yemen anymore with Jewish families. And it's not just the same thing. If you're a Jew in Yemen, you're in the weeds. But if you're a Jew in Yemen, you don't mix with milk and meat, right? You don't do milk and meat. You don't do shellfish. And what do we do on Shabbat? we have to have a Sabbath something. So every single host country has their own sort of like version of like a Shabbat stew. Iraq is tabit, which is the rice casserole. Cubana is in Yemen. Khamin are some of the Mizrahi countries, and so on and so forth. So all of those cuisines are found in Israel, right? And it was just amazing to see it all right in front of you from a server that doesn't even take a cigarette out of her mouth. Like it's all so cool. And so I was like, wait a minute, why are we deconstructing? Why are we clarifying? Why are we doing all this like stuff when this is really what's exciting? This is how we want to eat. Explains where we're from and what Israel is. And so we came back and we opened Zahav, which is probably a fancier version of that. Like Laser Wolf, which is our shipudia, is closer to that. At the time, I don't think people understood. We had to help ease them into it, and the way to do it was like more fine dining, even though Zahav is still pretty casual. So we opened Zahav, people were into it. We decided to open Dizengoff after that, which is a hummusia, which is just hummus. We have since turned Dizengoff into more of like a cafe, kind of nighttime vibe with bar. But it's still very hummus friendly during the day. We opened Goldie, which is a falafel shop, just because falafel really sucks in the United States. And we started making Trina milkshakes, so it's actually vegan, and they're awesome. And you guys can Google the recipe. We have it in Israeli Soul, but if you haven't purchased the book, you can Google it, and you can make them in with a VitaPrep and ice cube trays. All right, very, very good. And then we opened Kfar, which is the bakery, which is a shout out to Kfar Saba and Mafiat Kfar, which is where I started cooking. We make my grandmother's borekas and rogalach and the kubana, the Yemeni bread. That's actually the bread that we use for our toast. It's cool. It cooks for overnight at low temperature. It's phenomenal. And then we opened, well, Federal Donuts was accidental. Fried chicken, donuts, coffee. So the three major American food groups. Interestingly enough, though, we opened Federal Donuts in the like we were using Zahav as the sort of test kitchen. So all of the original spices for the fried chicken were like Israeli. And so schug, we love, do you all know what schug is? It's the Yemeni chili paste. It's like amazing, right? Lior, who owns La Boite in New York, which is our spice blender too. I don't know if you've ever bought spices from him, but they're like the best, right? He has all these weird names for his blends. Like he's got this basturma spice, which is called Ararat, which is the name of this mountain in Turkey where basturma probably originated. So he makes dried schug, and he calls it shabazi. Does anybody know? Like, we got a couple laughs here. Shabazi was a Yemeni poet that came to Nevet Tzedek in the turn of the century. And famous, amazing work. Nobody knows about a turn of the century Yemeni poet that came to Tel Aviv, right? But everybody in our restaurants knows it as shabazi spice. So we do Korean style, so twice fried chicken, rolled in this like dried schug spice. The name just sort of happened to be, we like just used it on the menu at Federal Donuts. So everybody knows this fried chicken with this like green spicy business as shabazi chicken. I bring Lior from New York to Federal Donuts, and at that time we only had one, and it's in Pennsport, which is like a very working class neighborhood. It's like our customer is everybody, like cops, criminals, like everybody works, everybody that works in the area also, which is kind of like on the port eats there. And we're standing in line, and there's this guy that's like 7 feet tall with like these like, he was like probably a contractor, maybe a painter, just looked super tough, obviously had an Eagles hat on, was probably like almost shirtless, and he was like talking to like either his friend or himself or to maybe Lior, because Lior was looking, and he's like, yo, you gotta try that shabazi chicken, it's the bomb. And Lior is like, my work on this planet is done, you know? It was like the most incredible moment. So Federal Donuts, and then we just opened Jaffa Bar like 4 weeks ago, and that is actually the only restaurant that we serve shellfish in. And it's kind of like a raw bar, and We have a very good burger there too. So my favorite restaurant though is always Zahav, and that's the one that I love the most. Jaffa Bar is super dope. Laser Wolf has incredible French fries, and it's like 20 feet of charcoal grill. And we have one in Brooklyn, New York, actually at the Hoxton Hotel, and it's on it's on the 10th floor. It's on the roof deck basically. It has the best view of Manhattan. It's right over the East River. You see like a sunset over Manhattan every night, and it's generally open or very drafty. And because of the wind and air circulation, it stokes the charcoal. So when it's really windy, it's like there's smoke, and the top 2 floors of the hotel smell like kebab. So that also might be my favorite. It's hard to pick a favorite, but which one are you the most interested in?
I've been to Laser Wolf and Bar. I've been to Bar. The Laser Wolf in Brooklyn. It was amazing. We met you there. We have a picture with you.
Heyo.
You should never tell your firstborn that Zahav is his favorite, because then he'll also know that he's the favorite. So you should keep that in mind.
Yes.
Because clearly Zahav is the favorite because it's your first. Right?
Yeah. Well, my first right now he's at 13 years. He's not my favorite. Yeah, he's trailing behind. But yeah, thank you.
It's being recorded.
Yeah. All right. Exactly.
Yes, in the white.
How do we get you?
How do we get a Goldie's in Seattle?
How do we open a Goldie?
I will say you franchised the Federal Donuts, so that is
I know we did
possible.
franchise Federal Donuts. I mean, I really love the Pacific Northwest, and you have a really beautiful vibe here, guys. I don't know if you know that, but it's really wonderful. I mean, I think Goldie would be amazing. I mean, I think Laser Wolf would probably make a lot of sense here too. I don't know. I love it. You know, the produce is amazing. People are cool. It's beautiful. Yeah, I don't know. Should we just? Where do you live? Yeah, we love it here.
Yes, center.
What's your approach to creating a new dish, and to what extent do you improvise?
That's a great question. What approach do we take to create a new dish, and to what extent do we improvise? That's sort of like juggling what is in season at that moment, what the farmers bring us. What dish did I have at one Shabbat table in Israel at one time? How does it work with produce? And what is very cool, you know? And I think it's all those sort of things. I mean, the beautiful thing, and this is kind of hard, this is like a hindsight deal, but to open an Israeli restaurant in Pennsylvania means that you can look at Israel and say, we like the Yemeni, we like the Libyan, we're going to take this from here. And in Israel, 20 years ago, if you asked an Israeli on the street where the best Israeli restaurant was, there was no answer, you know, because you'd go to Jaffa, there's like, you know, Bulgarian, Romanian, Arabic, or, you know, Palestinian, or what, and so there was no mixing and matching. And I feel like, I was talking about this with an Israeli chef friend of mine too. I was like, you know, you've got one grandparent that's Iraqi, one parent that's Polish, one that's Yemeni, and one that's Sephardic, and why do you go to France and then make French food in Israel? Like, what? Like, your Saturday afternoon is the best thing that we could possibly eat. And so I think at some point, it sort of switched over, and I think people just realized that, like, they didn't need to mimic European or Asian or American food in Israel. It's all kind of right there. And for us, it was a lot clearer of a vision, because we are also, you know, we're in Pennsylvania. Like, we, you know, if you're not comfortable with like butternut squash and cabbage most of the time, you got nothing, right? And so we had to use Lior's spices to help tell a story. We had to improvise to if you were Israeli and you closed your eyes and you ate something, it would remind you of home, even though it wasn't maybe the way that you were prepared. It was prepared for you. So we have to use things that are in season. We have to make it relevant. And me just copy pasting recipes from Israel doesn't work. A chopped salad, when it's 15 degrees out in February, doesn't taste the same. And we could import the tomatoes and we could import the cucumbers. It just doesn't taste right. You know, so we have to like pickle the green tomatoes. We have to figure out how to like, you know, preserve mango. We have to do things to help tell the story.
Yes. John.
Oh, yeah. So the question is, because I don't like mayonnaise, have I ever used hummus instead, not just tahina, but like hummus as a replacement? Hummus to me is like a little bit too dense, so I wouldn't do that. Tahina to me sort of makes the most sense. But you know, hummus on wheat bread with smoked turkey and avocado is fantastic. Yeah, very good. Yes.
I want to be fair to the back there.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay.
Yes. Way back. Yes. That way.
I am appreciating how hospitality is having a moment, and the principles of hospitality are kind of coming out of restaurants and into other parts of life. And I'm wondering if you have like 3 principles of hospitality
Ooh.
Oh,
that
3.
you love and that you think the Jewish community could learn from or
What?
The second part of that is going to get you canceled along with us. But so 3 principles of hospitality. I mean, we can sort of elaborate. Okay, so that's a great question. The things that I love are making people feel good and making memories. The things that I love are making people feel special. And you know, the bonus for me is to be able to help explain or maybe advocate or just share a country that I'm from and a land that I'm from that is very, very misunderstood, right? So I think being inviting is maybe a way to do that, but I just also, I think my mom was like this. She was this incredible English teacher and was just so good. You know, there are people, she passed away 8 years ago, maybe 9 at this point, and there will still be people that come to me in the restaurant and say, you know what, I sat next to your mom once on an airplane 10 years ago, and I like had to come in just to say hi to you, to like tell, you know, like that. And so I definitely get that, I think, from my mom, and it was just to me, and she was an English teacher at a Solomon school in Squirrel Hill, and then also an English teacher in Kfar Saba at a high school. And at her funeral, they closed the high school so everybody could come, right? And I was like, man, what an impact. Now, she would drive me crazy, but to watch her go out of her way to make everybody around her feel good was just, you know, it was almost selfish because it made her feel so good. And that is what we try to do. I have this sort of joke with my employees that I love like comping food, like I love buying meals for people, and my managers aren't incentivized by things like food costs and stuff like that, right? And I was like fighting with my GM once. His name is Okan. He just got promoted to be a director, but he is Turkish, came to the United States with like $500 in his pocket or something like that, right as Zahav opened, and started as a busboy and then worked all his way up to general manager of the restaurant, won a Beard Award for Outstanding Restaurant. I mean, really just an amazing guy. And we'd be at these manager meetings and he'd be like, chef, you're comping too much food. And I'm like, Okan, it doesn't affect your salary at all. Why are we fighting about this? It makes me feel good, you know? And I've sort of realized, now listen, you can't do that for everybody, but to me, I try to convey to my team, which is a little bit harder to do just because we get bigger and bigger, that I'm willing to do literally anything to make people feel good, right? And it is a complicated time that we live in, right? And if you come to Zahav, you're here for like 2.5 hours. If you go to Federal Donuts, it could be a 5-minute exchange, and you could buy a donut and a cup of coffee. And if you go to like Laser Wolf, maybe it's somewhere in the middle. I have no idea. Whatever it is, I want you to forget about what's going on outside. I want you to come in and feel good, and I want you to leave with a memory, you know? And I will do literally whatever it takes to get you there. And I think that, like, you know, showing people in the restaurant, I'm very big on eye contact. I'm very big on, like, showing people to the bathroom or whatever, right? I mean, if you stand up in a restaurant, you're doing 2 things. going to the bathroom or you're leaving. Right? Or whatever. I don't know what else you guys do out here, but that's back where I'm from, that's what we do, right? And so I'm like, okay, everybody, if somebody stands up, you make eye contact with them and you show them the way. And you know what? It's so much more than what most people do. And like, we sort of build on that. And I know that's a really stupid example, but I will say, I will use a specific example. So the idea for me is like, I want to be known for making people feel good and for being positive. And I don't mean this in like a kumbaya, but there's so many reasons for us to be pissed off and negative all the time. All you have to do is look at your phone, right? And I want the opposite of that for my restaurant. And that's how I want people to like remember us, right? And so many years ago, there was an ATOP at Zahav. And it was parents that were probably in their 50s or 60s. It was a bunch of like 20 to 30-year-olds. And they were sitting around and they were eating. And right before dessert, they all broke out a bag of Reese's peanut butter cups. And everybody looked like, they looked happy to be there, but I could tell that some of the parents were like crying a little bit, you know? And I kept thinking, and I was like, you know what? Like, they lost a child, and that child's favorite thing was Reese's peanut butter cups. And I remember my mother, after my brother, who served in the IDF and was killed in 2003, on his grave in Kfar Saba in Israel was a bag of Sour Patch Kids for a very long time. Actually, I don't know how the bag stayed there for so long. I mean, it was outdoors. And I kept thinking about, like, this, you know, first of all, for us, like, what a privilege. This is how you're going to celebrate your child's life. And I don't know if we ever even had that conversation, but I knew, and she knew that I knew. And I was just, like, super emotional, you know? And I was like, God, there's nothing more important to me than being part of this. So obviously, I bought their dinner, and it felt great. But you know, to explain that to a team that come from all over. We have immigrants that have gone through hell for the privilege of working in our country and living in America, right? We have Ukrainian refugees right now at the restaurant. We have a bunch of Turkish immigrants. We have everybody, right? Everybody has baggage. Everybody has struggle. And to get everybody on the team to recognize that they were part of making a family feel special, celebrating probably the anniversary or a birthday of a death of a child, it was so important, and I don't take that shit lightly, right? And so, you know, for me, it's like that story, not just because I'm wearing Reese's peanut butter socks, but that means the world to me because that's something that like people did for my family when we were going through it. That's what people did in Israel. You know, it's a little bit, because there's mandatory draft in Israel, our relationship to military over there is very different than what you would expect here, right? And after my brother was killed, my mom was telling me that she went to, you know, like there's like, basically on every corner in Israel, there's like a produce stand, unrefrigerated, and you could just buy like figs or whatever. And my mom like went in, and the guy was like, you know, the fruit is on me today. Nobody should ever go through what you went on. And she didn't know this person at all, and it was just like community. And so to be part of that team and to have that relationship with guests is by far the most important thing that I do, you know? And so I don't know how to translate that. I want to hear so you wanted me to elaborate on a lesson for potentially the Jewish community. Right. Given what I said, I want to hear what your answer is because I feel like you're a lot smarter than I am.
That's a lot of pressure. I think the way that you talk it's your love language. And I think in the Jewish community, a lot of what we do is tushes and seats, and it feels less personal and less of a love language. And I think there's a lot of different ways to have a love language. And I think when
Yeah, that's a great answer. Thank you so much.
My mother just boiled all vegetables. There was no love involved whatsoever. Really. So I never knew that affection.
Up there?
Yes. Up there, yes.
I have two questions. Before I ask, I want to thank you for everything you've done for IDF soldiers. And like you said, after October 7th, I personally worked for Benjamin Netanyahu. Don't like the guy as well. Never did. But,
I said it was hypothetical when I said it. Yeah.
We're still going with that. It's a.
I'm not afraid to say it.
Okay.
So really, thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Two questions. The first, as a chef, I have something I like to call imposter syndrome. I always have the fear when I likes my food that that I suck, that I don't belong. That one moment someone will figure out that I'm basically a fraud.
You and I share that condition, my friend.
And I saw something in an interview, and I was like, oh, I'm not alone. I was wondering how you feel about it. And the second one has more to do also with your documentary, which is the first time I've heard you was watching Netflix, watching that documentary. Someone told me that you have to watch this. What is Israeli food is always a loaded question for me because, like you said, in Israel, you ask what is Israeli food, but I don't know. I'm half Persian, half Indian. My question is, especially now, in the climate nowadays, what do you feel about anyone talking about cultural appropriation? For me personally, as a chef, it kind of annoys me when you have stuff like pasta or el pastor, which is basically shawarma, and stuff like that wouldn't exist if it wasn't because of cultural appropriation. Stuff that we wouldn't enjoy. I know my first attempt at a restaurant, it was a food truck, was basically Mexican and South Indian fusion. Today, probably someone would call this cultural appropriation. I'm not Mexican. But and I've also done some Cuban food and stuff like that. I've heard some comments on my food and stuff like that. And in the past year, there was a Jewish chef from Minnesota or something that talked about Israelis culture appropriating Palestinian food. How do you feel about this comparison?
Well, so you only have to tackle imposter syndrome and cultural appropriation.
That's it.
So
All right.
just knock that out.
It depends, right? Like, what order do I have to answer it? Well, listen.
Before we know you're a phony,
First
answer
of
the
all,
cultural appreciation.
Listen, yeah, chef, I feel the same way. I mean, it's weird. We're in this industry where you have to exceed expectations of like strangers all day long. And you have to do it with food, which is the most subjective thing ever. So it's basically impossible. And we know that there's no such thing as perfect, yet we strive for it. So we really sometimes hate ourselves because it's a really hard industry. And then also, if you make one mistake, which we do every single night, and it's a bad review, or it's a bad, the awards don't mean anything if one person has a crappy meal at Zahav, right? And so I can see that kind of neuroses, though, makes great chefs. So I feel like the imposter syndrome thing I totally get. But again, I think that you should focus on the relationship that you have with your guests. And I think that the more that you take yourself out of the conversation, and the more that it's sort of service to other people, I think the happier you'll probably be. So I would give that a shot, but I go through the same thing that you do whenever we get press, whenever there's like a thing, especially now because there's commentary on everything. It's very hard to not self-loathe and be insecure. So you just got to get through it, but put your guest first, put that experience that you have together at the top, and you'll do fine, you know. And I think that like Indian Persian, oh my God, why don't you open that food truck, bro? That sounds sick. And that actually, no, I know food trucks are a nightmare. You don't want to do that, but well, you should open a brick and mortar with that, because I think it's incredible. And it's interesting what you say as it relates to cultural appropriation. Listen, obviously, I'm accused of that all day long. I can't, like, I don't know, pour all of what... yeah, it's all nonsense, actually, okay? And listen, I get it, okay? I understand why this is happening, but the reality is we're talking about food, right? What do you call an Israeli born in Israel? What's the name? Sabra. What's sabra? It's a cactus fruit, right? What do you call a Palestinian that was also born in Palestine? Sabra, right? Great. Sabra, the cactus fruit, did not come to the Middle East until the 18th century, okay? So it's all bullshit, okay? It's nonsense. I listened to this lecture, and this was at a Tel Aviv, he was a professor from Tel Aviv, and he did this whole thing. It was really funny. I mean, he's really smart. I can't remember what his name is. We might have all read his stuff before. But he does this whole thing on like the eggplant carpaccio, which was like really big in Israel in the 90s. And it was Eyal Shani and Asaf Karnin and everybody arguing about who created or invented the eggplant carpaccio, which is funny because carpaccio is an Italian word and it means raw. And this is actually cooked eggplant that's opened up, right? It's flattened eggplant. And you put trina on it and do the thing. And Eyal Shani, of course, thought he invented it, and so on and so forth. And then at the end of this whole thing, the hypothesis is like, this is all stolen Palestinian food. And I was like, really? Like eggplant? Like Jews were cooking eggplant in Persia before Islam existed by far. And I got even more into it. And so I found out, my good friend Luna Piner wrote a book called Sephardi. She lives in Bordeaux. She's a scholar. And she figured out all the food that Sephardic Jews and conversos cooked was well documented. We know all about their recipes and their diets because they were all part of the Inquisition trials. And because food was the biggest indicator. If you did this, you were definitely a Jew, right? And they have they would have these trials that would be like 50 pages of like, well, they didn't use pork fat on that night, and they made 2 separate pots. I swear to God. So in medieval Spain, if you cooked eggplant, olive oil, and cilantro, guess what? You're a Jew, right? In medieval Spain. And I was like, well, those things seem, olive oil. Like, I think it's funny when people are like, olive oil, olive trees, you stole it. I'm like, fucking Hanukkah, dude. What are you talking about? Like, come on. Right? Shivat Minim. I got it right here. Okay? Like, and so I find it all to be silly, but what's so interesting is that everybody steals everything. I mean, Persian Empire and Ottoman Empire, talk about appropriation. Holy cow, the Ottomans appropriated, transmitted, made everybody do everything a certain way, took they took kanafe from Nablus, and it's literally everywhere. If you go to Turkey or if you go to Greece, you're going to eat kanafe. My family was Bulgarian under Ottoman occupation. Before they ever came to Israel, in 48, they were making kanafe. And they were doing it because the Turks took it out of Nablus, took the cheese from Akko, moved it all over, right? And then I make kanafe, and somehow I'm the one that is stolen. Like, it's all selective. I think it's very specific. If I were Palestinian, living under occupation, in checkpoints every day, people around me living in what is a shitty condition, I would definitely be pissed off that Mike Solomonov has his face on a hummus thing. But the reality is, Israelis and Palestinians both did not invent hummus. And Israelis marketed it better. And that, and I'm not saying that there is, like I acknowledge Palestinian cuisine. We try to support as many Palestinian farmers. I am not happy about the current situation over there. Like what I want for I want 2 states. I want Palestinian independence. I want morality, and I also want Israel to be safe. Right? All those things. And this is right. I wasn't going to talk about this, but this is what I was talking about before. My politics have remained exactly the same, but I just think that there's 20 other cultures that can make hummus, and when I do it, it's somehow stolen, and I don't accept those things, and it's all BS. So keep making what it is that you're making. Listen, how many new American restaurants have we gone to before? What the hell is American food? California and Texas were Mexico 100 years before Israeli independence. So I can eat freaking tacos in California and somehow that's not offensive? Like, come on. So do you. But bro, you gotta do this Indian Persian situation, all right? My brother-in-law who lives in Khadera is from Shiraz, and he makes the best tariq in the world, and he was one of 11 kids and was the guy that made rice. And so I learned how to make Persian rice from him, and there is nothing better than properly made tariq. So I got it. Next time I'm here, you got to make it, bro, all right?
So,
Thank you.
So we have actually learned a lot tonight. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We got a little history, a little politics. That's nice. We got a new Jeff Foxworthy routine. If you cook with olive oil and cilantro, you might be a Jew.
Yeah.
It's gonna be fantastic. I'm like,
Right, and then you're sentenced to death, right? Unless you convert.
right.
Yeah.
It may be over after that. Yeah.
Yeah. Wait. To go back to that really quickly, I'm so sorry. So you know how like Spanish restaurants all hang hams? That was that goes back to the Inquisition. It was a way to signify that you were not a converso or you were not Jewish. So we're all like, come on this, come on that. That was literally a way for them to escape death, you know? All right.
And on that note, no.
Yes. Is there?
What? No, we had. I'm getting this.
Please,
on.
can we please just
Yes.
do one more?
Yes.
Please,
Okay.
please.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm trying to bring us back to reality because it's
Reality.
I mean, today's coming up, Thanksgiving. I want some ideas from you.
Oh.
Really?
All right, I thought you were going to say today, like, the Eagles won, right? We're good. They did, right? All right. Go Birds! All right, so let me tell you something. I shared this a little while ago. I invented something. Do you guys want to hear it? Do you know those Snyder's, those like honey mustard pretzel bites? Amazing, right? Super healthy, too. Take one of those bags, big bag, take one carton of stock, chicken stock, low sodium for health. Pour it on top of the honey mustard business. Take one stick of butter, melt it, dice 2 ribs of celery. You guys should be writing this down. 1 onion, saute the onion and the celery, right? Add it to, after 20 minutes, or 30 minutes, the pretzels are gonna hydrate with the stock. Throw in your butter, onion, celery zhuzh, chopped sage, if you want, or dried sage. 1 egg, and bake that shit at 375 degrees. It is the best stuffing you will ever have in your life, all right? I tried to reach out to the good people of Snyder's to be like, I want to be an ambassador, and they never returned my call. So, yeah. Let me know, and when you make that, tag me on Instagram, and then also call me an appropriator, and we're good, okay?
So finally, I know everybody has a copy of the book, but you can still buy copies of the book for other people out there. It really is fantastic. After reading Ada Lengi's Simple, which wasn't simple, it was really nice to find a cookbook that I can follow along, can make these meals. They're all fantastic. It's great to have you back here.
Thank you so much.
You can go to any of the restaurants. Somebody here has to franchise the Federal Donuts here in the greater Seattle area, please. Because we can do that. We can do that, right? And it's really lovely to have somebody who has integrity when it comes to their politics, their beliefs, and what you're doing with your own business, which is not only to cook with love, but to serve with love and to bring people in and take care of them. Thank you so much,
Thank
Mike.
you so much
It means
for-
a lot to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys, thank you so much.
Slip him some tongue.